A very good evening and welcome to this edition of The Frontline on NBS TV. My name is Charles Mwangusha Mpagi. And tonight, NRM is about to celebrate 36 years in power. The big question is, what is there to celebrate? Or maybe if you put it differently, is there anything worth celebrating? Maybe there are many, but also what are those areas of the fundamental change that haven't come true? This is coming amidst a crisis of fuel supplies in the country, where some towns, some cities, have seen the price rise as high as 12,000 shillings for a litre of fuel. In and around Kampala, the price of fuel has been ranging between 4,964 upwards to anything up to 7,000 shillings. What does that mean? What are the logistics? What are the logistical issues? What are the other challenges? And why don't we have fuel reserves or sufficient fuel reserves for the country? What's the plan there? And of course, the broader issues about the economy. KCCA is implementing a smart city campaign. They've been plucking out kiosks for mobile money dealers. They're telling borders not to step into the town center. They're telling hawkers to get out the streets. What does this mean? Who are you leaving behind? Who are you including in this economy as it reopens fully, as the president announced in his New Year's address? To discuss this with me, I have a full panel with a lady on the panel. Let me start with the regular frontliners. Norbert Mao, you said green is being what? You said something about green.
It's green.
No, he said something about green. People are looking for green.
I was attending a birthday party for a son of a friend of mine, Honorable Robert Rukari of Mbarara North,
yes,
who has turned 18. So I decided to approximate appropriate colors.
Yes. So you put a trace of green and the gold.
No, you have to be blind to call this yellow. But
it is Dr. Bariomus who calls it yellow, so.
No, in Uganda you see what you want.
Okay. Okay, let me do a quick introduction and then we'll link to one of our correspondents in the field and then we'll launch into the discussion. So Norbert Mao is President General of the Democratic Party and a frontliner. I have MsJane Nalunga, who is Chief Executive Officer at SEATINI, Uganda.
Thank you.
I have the old man, Colonel General Andrew Mwenda. Colonel General Andrew Mwenda. I have...
I'm told, Charles, that people envy my rank so much.
I have Ofono Opondo, who is a frontliner and head of the Government Media Center. And last but not least, I have the Minister for ICT and National Guidance, Dr. Chris Bariomonsi. Let's link to our correspondent for a few updates and then we'll come back into the discussion. Hello, can you hear us? Please come through and bring us up to speed from where you are, what's happening with the fuel crisis.
Thank you, Charles. I'm coming to you live from Malaba here. And of course, the people you are seeing, these are drivers who are supposed to move from, of course, Malaba here to as far as Kampala, and others are actually reaching Mbarara, others are ending in Jinja. And of course, let us just hear from them where they are going and where they are from and why they are still stranded here. My boss, where are you from and where are you heading?
I'm from Eldoret Pipeline. I'm heading to Kampala.
So why are you still around here?
It was a big jam on the road.
Have you been cleared?
Not yet. We have not been cleared.
So what is causing jam the other side, where you, of course you're coming from?
I think it's you are in the Ugandan side. They are not working very fast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Let me hear from my brother here. My brother, we want to simply just know where you're from and where you are heading, and why are you still here at Malaba?
I'm from Eldoret. We loaded on Saturday. Today is when we are just close to Uganda. You know we can't proceed before we clear here at the GFI. These are where we usually dip our fuel. But the process at the border is too slow. The jam from Malaba going back towards Eldoret, it's now covering around, I think it is around 80 to 90 kilometers. 100. Yeah. The jam now is 100 kilometers. That is terrible. You can imagine covering jam of 100 kilometers to here. From Saturday, this is the day we are arriving here.
Recently, of course, Ugandan government came up with the idea, of course, suspending the mandatory testing of COVID-19. And right now, of course, yesterday I was at the other side of the border where they are actually verifying you. Indeed, there was nothing like testing, but verification of documents. Yeah. Why are you still around here? We've been told that, of course, you have some problems where we are right now.
No, I can't say we have a problem because this is just the normal procedure that we usually follow. Once you cross, you have to wait for your vehicle to be dipped by GFI, that is UNBS, to confirm the quantity of the fuel and whatever you are carrying. Then from here we proceed to our destinations.
Is it true that these people do not work past 4 p.m.?
Currently, no, they are working. Okay. We can't complain about the time of working because they are working. The thing is, they are too slow. They are clearing the tracks is too slow. I don't know what is
very small.
The slab is small. You can imagine this parking is usually full from 100 to 150 trucks per day. But you can see they are countable. Only around 10 trucks. Okay. Now 10 trucks is what is proceeding to Kampala or the other destination around Mbarara, the environs.
Oh, yes, Charles. Of course, those are drivers who are supposed to move from here to Kampala, to Jinja, and so other districts. And of course, that is, we have just heard from them. The problem is actually the slow clearance that is really taking place by URA. And that is causing this. Back to you at the command center, Charles.
Thank you very much, David Ocheng, bring us that update from the Malaba border. We come back to the studio and begin the discussion on this particular crisis on fuel. 100 kilometers. You're clearing about 10 trucks. 100-kilometer stretch of jam created over a long period translates into the prices that we have been seeing for fuel in this country. That's where we'll anchor this discussion. Why are we where we are? Let me start with a question as best as that. Can I start with you, Chairman Mao?
I think we shall wait for the Prime Minister to instruct the Minister to direct the Commissioner to investigate. To be honest, it is a farce.
I saw your tweet about that.
It's comical. And we have a Minister for Economic Monitoring. When fuel is in short supply, those who pay the price are the ordinary citizens. The cost of transport is going up. There's it is hitting our wallets, all of us, and everybody is inconvenienced. I think it is important to listen to those who were addressing us from Malaba. They said those in charge are very slow. Who are the supervisors of those people? I think it is our customs authorities. I've not heard anything from the Uganda Revenue Authority. It is basically politicians who are trying to struggle with the answers. Everything in life depends on logistics. how you get goods from point A to point B in time. But above all, it is about planning. Even in the days when we used to have caravans of camels and even people carrying goods on their heads, you must have some kind of plan to ensure that there is no shortage because you understand what is happening. So it's important for us to point our finger at the real source of the problem according to the truck drivers. The truck drivers are talking about incompetence. So why isn't the government cracking the whip?
On that incompetence?
Yeah.
With your tweet and the video that followed it, because it appears the Prime Minister ad-libbed and then lost her train of thought along the way. Do you really think there was... when you begin cracking the whip, where do you start from, where do you end?
Well, she lost both her mental balance and physical balance. and in a way, she was throwing her hands in the air, basically saying, I have asked somebody to do something about this. The reality is that this is a problem at our border, and it is the customs officials who have got to give the answer. There is absolutely no excuse for that. I saw a journalist from NBS, Mr. Daniel Lutaya, saying that there are some snobs who have got a contract. I forget the name of the company, but they have been given a contract to be in charge of that process. And they are doing things at their own pace without caring about the impact.
Okay.
If indeed that is true, I would expect that our members of parliament should head to the border and see what is happening, or else citizens are going to have to take matters into their own hands.
Okay.
The answer to that question has been given by the truck drivers. We don't have to talk anything about government policy or even any politics. This is about incompetence.
Let's move it to Jane and ask the question about, you have two issues in one, because what triggers the problem is the order by the Minister of Health that these truck drivers must have PCR tests conducted at the border by Ugandan officials at a cost of 30 United States dollars, which is about 130,000 shillings, 150,000 shillings. Now you have Norbert Mao talking about incompetence. No, not Norbert Mao, the truck drivers at the border talking about incompetence. Why are we where we are, from your perspective?
Okay, why are we where we are? For me, I would like to take a deep analysis of this issue. That maybe the challenge is not at the border, really. The challenge is here at the capital. And the way Mao has talked about planning, we haven't planned for shocks at all. Because this isn't the first time we are having challenges with our oil. The other time, 2007, when there was 2007, when there was the election violence, we had the same. Our government has been planning for reserves. In fact, when you look at the budget framework paper for 2021, 2022, 2022, 2023, there are reserves to refurbish the Jinja Reserve, the Nakasongola Reserve, other reserves in Mbarara, in Sujui, so many towns. It hasn't been done. We don't have any reserves. It's like we are living from hand to mouth, you know. So we need to analyze that also. And maybe what I also want to point out, that this crisis is not isolated. And for me, in a way, I'm happy that we are having this crisis to see the policy gaps. The farmers have been having challenges, for example, with the maize price, falling from 700, 1,000 to 50 to 100 shillings. It's a crisis, but nobody talks about it, you know. So it shows the lack of government to regulate. In fact, when I saw the Prime Minister falling, it was saying, you're on your own. We have been on our own as citizens for a long time. When it comes to maize prices, it comes to health, we had a health problem, you know, bodies being confiscated, you know, and government was just telling the private health facilities, reduce the prices. They didn't. We continued, you know. So we have been seeing, even transport, you remember transport, Madam Nakalema had to go to the bus terminal. To the bus they didn't. They didn't. They ignored. We have seen the CBR by the banks, private commercial banks. The central bank puts a CBR in place. They ignored. They ignore. So it's the capacity of government to regulate the private sector, because this crisis at the border shouldn't be a crisis. If we had reserves, it shouldn't have been a crisis, but we don't have any reserves, you know. So we need to look at this issue from a broader perspective, the issues around the role of the state, of government to regulate, to protect the citizens. But I heard the Minister of Energy saying that, we are in a liberalized economy, it's market and it's supply and demand. And for me, I don't think we should be saying those economic jargons. They don't work, you know, because we need policies which work for the people. Another issue I think is about the regional cooperation and regional integration, because these drivers were tested in Kenya. They have to be tested again. And this is another issue which is also at Entebbe, you know. I come from Lusaka, I'm tested, but you want to test me again. That means you don't believe in the testing facilities where I'm coming from. But for the East African region, I think we should have had some level of trust in it. But maybe to commend government, this has been addressed. I understand now it's 14 days, and they have put there some facilities which they 66 facilities which they have harmonized anyway. But this is what they should have done right from the beginning. So there are so many issues which we need to look at broadly, because today it's fuel, tomorrow it's health, the other day it's maize, you know. It's the entire economy and how we should be able to manage our economy.
Andrew, let me come to you. Is it incompetence? Is it who's running the deals for the testing at the border, for the fuel supply chain, or is it a failure of policy? Is it a dysfunctionality of government? What is the problem?
I think it's a combination of all those. What I think is that there is a fundamental disconnect between the COVID crisis we have and government policy and attitude. And towards the end, I'll explain that part of this comes from incompetence, part of it comes from self-interested parties who stand to profit from this COVID crisis, and part of it comes from the personality of our president, who is a hypochondriac. Remember, hypochondriac is a person who has an excessive fear of infection. Our president has an excessive fear of infection. So he's a very easy target, since he's the final decision maker, to go and sell him a story that we should have high levels of control. Let me begin by giving you examples. One, let's begin with the internal realities of Uganda. When the government imposed this second test at the border, at Mulago, they did a test of all the nurses who are administering vaccinations. They found 80% of the nurses were positive. Two, at Mulago, they tested all their staff. 50% were positive. At Mulago, those people who report to that place there to test because they have symptoms, every day, the whole of the other week and last week, anything between 98 to 100% were testing positive. And overall in the country, the positivity rate was 28%. It means that the Omicron, that the variant of COVID, was so widely spread in Uganda. Practically, 50% of Ugandans or 40% could be having COVID. So let me ask you, Charles, why stop a truck driver from coming in a country which is collapsing under the weight of COVID infections by everybody? What is it that they are protecting, even at the airport? I can understand when you're going to board a plane, they can say, people there maybe don't have it, many people have tested negative, and the plane is a contained environment with compressed air, so there is high levels of spread. But when I land at Entebbe, and I'm entering Uganda, why should you stop me entering even if I'm positive? Please tell me. In a country that is teeming, and we have a doctor here, but in a country teeming with so much COVID, because that's why Britain today, was it today or yesterday?
Yesterday.
They ordered the removal of masks and all these restrictions. The positivity rate is 200,000.
In the United Kingdom?
Yes, per day they were testing. They realized the thing is so widely spread that to try to stop a person at the airport from entering and putting them into quarantine.
I think England, Sweden have removed every restriction.
Every restriction. Yes. Because of the reality that COVID, in any case from a scientific perspective, by the way, it's important to let COVID spread through a population and then people develop herd immunity. Let me come to the second point. The second point is that the policies of COVID in Uganda do not relate to the reality of Uganda. You see, COVID has been much more lethal to people who are old. The average age of a person who has died of COVID is 76.6 years. Uganda, the median age of Uganda is 16 years. The people who are 75 and above, President Yoweri Museveni's age group, they are 1% of our population. So we are less at risk. That is why, although America has lost, how many people have died in the United States? 840,000?
Yes.
In Uganda, we have lost, by the way, the true number is 2,200. There is 1,200 who are people who died of COVID-like symptoms but had not been tested PCR positive. And we know that pneumonia is one of the biggest killers, and respiratory illnesses are one of the biggest killers. Because there was a lot of public pressure, people were dying of respiratory problems, Ministry of Health took a decision and issued a statement that we shall get all these 1,200 and add them onto the sample. Yes. So the death rate of
the assumed COVID death.
Assumed COVID deaths, there are 1,200 out of the 3,300. So about 2,100 are the only ones who are confirmed dead of COVID. Another point Uganda has
in a period of 2 years.
In a period of 2 years. So this is not a disease that is very lethal to the Ugandan health system. The third point is the government of Uganda is detached from existing realities. If you go to supermarkets, there is a man called Posiano Ngaberano. He's the owner of Capital Shoppers. Me, I am his biggest patron. I buy all from him, from his shop. I go there, I say, but this is missing, this is missing. So I call him. He says, Andrew, the turnaround time of importing containers has increased, say, from 2 weeks to about 4 months. You import something, it delays in Mombasa, it delays at the border because of COVID. So first of all, there were already scarcities of goods because of the international supply and logistical system for all products has been disrupted. In Dubai, I have books I wanted to move there. Things we used to move for 3 weeks are now taking 6 months. So we already have been suffering from that. How do you come and add another restriction at the border in a country teeming with COVID? That's because you don't want 70 truck drivers who maybe 3% may test positive, and many of them have already tested negative the other side of the border. Fourth, where I think Uganda, where I think government of Uganda is disconnected from reality. You see, the goods at the border that are held on 120 kilometers of traffic are goods owned by Ugandans. The trucks are largely owned by Kenyans. So Ugandans are delaying at the border. Their shops are empty. Their cash, they don't have cash because their stock is held there in that jam. At the same time, they are paying Kenyans. Remember that the owner of the truck will continue to charge you because his tax is also held. So you're increasing your costs to your own business community, accentuating your own scarcities, and at the same time, enriching Kenya. What kind of policy is that? Let me tell you. There is a deep disconnect between the government of Uganda and the realities of the business community and the ordinary consumer. And also, there is a big disconnect between the health realities of Uganda and the policies in regard to COVID that we have put in place. I don't understand why.
I want to throw that exactly to Ofono Pondo. What kind of policy, what kind of planning, what kind of coordination? I've been asking this question to every government official. Did Minister of Health speak to Ministry of Trade, speak to Minister of Transport, speak to speak to the National Oil Company and other players in this business before making those?
Well, I think we have had it so good as a country because according to Madame Nalunga, the last time we had the fuel crisis was 2007 as a result of the political violence, election violence in Kenya. Generally, things have been calm. Is Uganda the only one with this type of crisis? No. Remember in September last year, I think 20th, UK had 3 weeks or a month. There's a COVID suspect here. 3 weeks or 1 month of crisis on fuel. You remember people exchanged blows at petrol stations, at gas stations in UK, in London. Why? Because of COVID issues, supply chain, but the immediate cause really was truck drivers from other parts of the country said they cannot go to UK. They were being prevented, and they had the crisis. So that is a spike, and you cannot use it to judge the health of our economy or even the health of our decision making. Now, in this particular case, I want to associate myself with some elements of the narrative given. I think it mirrors, it reflects badly on government in the sense that for 2 years we have suffered COVID. The president did announce a month and a half ago that in January we are going to fully open the economy. In these 2 years, we have had the COVID National Task Force. What are the different scenarios they have been building in the event that COVID subsides or we make a decision as a country or the world that is now endemic and we are going to live with it, no matter? What are the different scenarios they have built? It appears to me, because it hasn't been published, we have been getting it piecemeal. It appears to me.
But you're the official spokesperson.
Yes, I'm now saying
yes.
it doesn't exist. And so we ended up with patchwork, make do with what can work. And it's not just on fuel, it is in education, it is in transport. The other day you had the Minister of Work said, border borders the curfew will only be opened during the week that schools open. Apparently, he did not know that there are students who use border for work from universities, because universities are operating. So what do you do with those children? So I think as a government, and this is what I'm saying, our policies are not well thought through in a comprehensive way. Secondly, there is continuous problem of working in silos. Because we had not had this policy of testing drivers and charging them $30 at the entry points for a while. Why was it introduced in late December? And if we chose to make that as a policy, we should have put sufficient logistics, including manpower. Because by that time we knew the number of trucks. I think Malaba alone is something like 3,000 trucks a day. Busia is half that. So we should have catered for that. I think the government does not have, we don't have very credible reasons as to why we have entered this crisis. I think it is self-inflicted. Now you are asking, I have been informed that indeed in late December, early January, I think January 2nd, actually the Ministry of Energy wrote to the Ministry of Health to say, to give their positions on how matters should be handled. The Ministry of Energy did not receive response.
From the Minister of Health?
Yes. And I think that's where I agree with Mwenda, that because the President and generally government had said we needed to protect people, I think there are people who have taken this to another level. They see the response to COVID as their responsibility, and therefore are unwilling or begrudgingly accommodate views from the sectors that are not directly medical related. And so I think this is self-inflicted wounds. Because why is it that when we have announced that we are fully opening the economy, then the Minister of Health says, oh, government for that matter, let me say, says we want to test you at the point of entry and we are going to charge. Also, what Nalunga has said, we are supposed to have had a one-stop center at the border. If it is not yet operational, I think our government should have liaised with the government of Kenya. If for some reason we don't trust, because they also don't trust ours anyway, our testing, wasn't it possible to agree on a joint mechanism of testing so that we have one testing point?
Let me ask a quick question
yes.
to you, Ofona, before we move on.
So I really say it is self-generated. Self-generated because we work in silos as government. This department is not talking effectively with the other. Okay. And so for me, I say, let us take the flak as a government because we have made this self-inflicted injury upon ourselves.
I'll reserve my question for you because I wanted to look at the testing. Who does the testing? Who takes the $30? What is the
well? The testing is done. The testing certainly is done in Uganda. For that matter, is done by the Ministry of Health.
The government decided to take over the cost later, and they are private players in this space.
Now, the other issue really is about. I think it was Nalunga talking about fuel. We have a fuel reserve, but it's not sufficient because our fuel reserve at Jinja is only 30 million.
30 million.
The daily consumption of fuel in Uganda is 6.5.
Yes.
The daily entry...
So basically you have 4 days of reserves.
Yes, 5 about.
Yeah.
The daily entry is about 200 million. We have been relying more on the fact that things have been normal, trucks would come, and so even if you have only 30 million liters of reserve and maybe about another 20 million in the fuel stations, you can go for approximately 10 days, even if you didn't. And therefore, because of the stability, the security situation in the country, the good economic environment, we have been relying on the fact that on a daily basis, we are having 200 million liters.
22 million?
200 million entering per day because I'm saying on a daily basis, each of those trucks you see
is carrying 45,000.
45,000,
yeah, 45,000. How many are you moving through? You said about an average 4,500?
Yeah. So what I'm simply saying, stressing is that we have been relying on the stability of the trade route, that on a daily basis, we have sufficient fuel coming in. And yes, we need to, maybe we did not take this as a priority to have government-controlled reserve. I think there's also a problem at Jinja because we have That reserve was handed over by the Ministry of Energy to the Uganda National Oil Company, which also subcontracted a private person, which is, because we are running a liberalized economy, that's a good thing to do. But I suspect there isn't sufficient supervision with that private company.
Let's have the minister come in here. Honorable Minister, from the narration you're hearing here, you're operating like my friends who run the border, Zenkola Zendia. So what comes in today is what I operate with. You are not coordinated as government. I don't know how much you have. How does the Minister of Health write, the Minister of Energy, write to the Minister of Health, and there's no response? How does the President announce 1.5 months before and says, no matter what the situation will be, we are moving to fully reopening the economy?
In December, the President actually directed respective ministries to develop comprehensive, workable SOPs.
Please respond.
Well, thank
so
you
they
very
let them the President.
Thank you very much. When the President announced that the economy is going to be fully opened, he did not say, stop the fight against COVID-19. Actually, he said, if the situation worsens, there is a risk that we can close the economy and close some sections. You must bear that in mind. And therefore, the Ministry of Health and the other agencies had to continue doing their work. Well, earlier on, we had taken a decision as a government to test all the incoming travelers, whether through the airport or the land borders. And initially, the testing was being done by the private players. Then we took over Entebbe as a government, and then announced...
After crisis at Entebbe also?
Not really.
There was a crisis of passengers arriving and the testing was problematic. And then government decided
yes, but
to
at
take
that
over.
time we were testing travelers from 10 countries which were high risk. And the private providers were not handling the situation well, like we are saying. And the decision was taken for government to take over the whole testing, and also we reduced the cost from $65 to $30 per test. But we left the land borders in the hands of the private sector. And the reason why we took a decision to do mandatory testing for all the incoming travelers was that even when travelers would come with negative PCR tests, a significant number were still testing positive when we subject them to test at the airport. And the Council of Ministers of the East African Community had sat earlier on. I think where the challenge came was the coordination between the Ministry of Health and the Council of Ministers, because the ministers in the ESC had met and agreed that they accredit laboratories across the region, and two, that they agree on a period of 14 days, that if someone is traveling and has 14 days, results within 14 days, they should be accepted across the border. I think somehow, to an extent, there was a breakdown in the communication, because on the 1st of January, the Ministry of Health brought a new measure that all the truck drivers be subjected to a mandatory test at the border. That's where I think the confusion was. And the drivers protested this measure. And I think it was brought in good faith. You see, Mr. Mwenda says the policy of managing COVID has not been thorough in Uganda. He says this because he has survived COVID. I can tell you, when you go to the figures which had been projected through modeling of the numbers of COVID-19, of the death, of the hospitalizations, because of the measures which Uganda took. But that we are talking over 3,000 people dying and so forth.
Minister,
it would have been worse.
Why should anybody believe your numbers, your projections? Why?
Do you have contrary figures?
No. You made the numbers, you made them up. You assumed them.
No.
Why should anybody have believed them in the first place? You held the president in a cage. Andrew called him, you said he's a hypochondriac. So you put him in a box and told him, Mr. President, this is a huge threat.
No, you
and then did the projections, scared the hell out of him, and then unleashed the crisis that we've been dealing with over the last 2 years.
You can say that, and I can with respect, say that's a bit reckless. You just get back to May, June, July, when we had the second wave. Do you recall that it's Ugandans who were demanding for a lockdown? Supposing we had not locked down the country, how many people would have died?
We don't know.
No, very many.
We don't know.
Those 3,000 you are talking about, the majority of them actually died during that second
Chris,
wave.
if I could ask a question.
Yes.
Uganda is not an island. Uganda lives next to a country called DRC, South Sudan, and Tanzania, who did not have a lockdown. And all of us as friends, relatives, and acquaintances in all these countries, there has not been the massive death that was predicted. I should perhaps say that the first lockdown was understandable because we had less information. But the second lockdown, we had a sufficient experience to realize that the most affected persons were seniors by COVID, and the COVID was not killing young people in large numbers, and we have a very young population, and therefore our measures cannot be the same as Italy or the United States.
No, by the way,
or Britain.
Your information is not necessarily correct. Some of those countries were not even reporting the death, WHO or to the other bodies. So you can't correctly say Tanzania, DRC, many people didn't die. You may not know, but we know many people died, and there are very many deaths which were averted in Uganda due to the measures which were instituted. Now, when I'm trying to explain why this crisis...
How do we establish that in a critical way? Because I would suppose that Tanzania never closed schools, by the way. I can tell you, Chris, if COVID was killing kids in schools, parents would run and pull their kids out. That's a normal reaction. My brother has a son studying there in Dar es Salaam, and I would talk to him every day. He says, no. Okay, some people have died of COVID. The way in my home, my elder sister's daughter died of COVID, and my eldest brother died of COVID. In our own compound in Kanyalo, we have married people of COVID.
So it's not that I've not been affected. You have a cousin who died of COVID.
I have two cousins who died of COVID.
You are saying the average was 76 years.
In the space of 1 month, in my immediate family, we lost 4 people. So it's not that I have not been affected by COVID. But what I'm saying is that if you try to sample, I have friends who live in Burundi, whom I would talk to. They said here nothing has been closed. And if there were massive deaths, many people would have gone and put their students out of school, closed their shops, and kept away. So maybe they had 1 or 2% death more than us. So, but we do not know,
let
Chris.
Me ask you,
just 1 second, Chris. We are not aware.
To my time.
Yes, we are not aware the other consequences of our extreme restrictions, which led to economic deprivation and effects of economic deprivation on people's livelihoods. Many more people could have died as a result of economic deprivation, of limited access to health facilities because they could not, there was limited transport and all this. You have not done that study.
Let me ask you, were there massive deaths in Uganda in the second wave of COVID?
There was few deaths.
Significant deaths.
Yes. It increased from 300 to 1,800.
So do you think it was wrong to close the economy and put restrictions?
Yes.
So what are you saying? That's the point I am making, that the measures, painful as they have been, that we instituted in Uganda to contain COVID, have been extremely helpful in containing this COVID-19.
Honorable Minister, if you could allow me.
I wish you give me time.
Yes, I'll give you time. Yes. We'll have the time for that. Yeah. In this same country, over a period of 2 years, we have lost upwards of 10,000 people to malaria, for example. 10,000 people, because this year alone, we've lost about 5,000 people to malaria. I mean, over the last year, 2021. 5,000 people have died because of malaria. You're comparing those numbers with 3,500, yes, who died of COVID. And the restrictions, and that we're looking at only one disease, malaria. We're not looking at the others. Has government done a study? Did government think through all these things and say, look, there's one study here, there's a second study here. The projections you did over COVID death, did you do them across the board?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, you must appreciate COVID-19 is a new disease whose science has been evolving, and we learn as we manage it. Different from malaria, TB, HIV, which have been around for some time. That's one. And therefore, some of the measures come along as it evolves. For instance, the coronavirus mutates very rapidly. You get Delta variant, it kills many people. You must change strategies. You get Omicron, you do not know how it will evolve. So definitely, you tend to have measures which may not be effective but you are trying them as you move along. That should be appreciated. But coming back to the reason for this crisis, that when the Ministry of Health instituted a new measure of mandatory testing for the truck drivers starting 1st January, that's what triggered this strike by the truck drivers and the queue which is being explained. But I can bring you to speed that we have since sat as a cabinet and taken a decision to resolve this issue by one, harmonizing with the decision which had been taken by the ministers in the East African community to allow negative PCR results from the laboratories which have been accredited and tested and checked. Number two, that we allow results which are within 14 days. So those, if you have a negative PCR test, you are allowed in. If you require to be tested, you will still be tested, but the government shall pay for that test, yes. And therefore now, the challenge of testing is no more. But like you saw from the footage, the recording down there, now the challenge, I think, is the URA. But so URA says it has improved the services. They have increased the manpower. Today, up to 9 p.m., they were able to clear 1,200 trucks, and yet ordinarily they clear 900 every day. So they have also improved the services. But of course, you know, fuel is checked. It is carried at the border points, because like the fuel destined for Uganda is given a different color from the fuel in the transit. So those are some of the delays which are being handled. And going forward in the next 7 or 10 days, we should be able to see distribution of fuel to the rest of the country being sorted out, and the prices should be able to normalize. So we call upon Ugandans to be patient. These are the pains of managing COVID-19, and the Ministry of Health took the decision in good faith to protect all of us.
Okay, so
you may, just hold on.
Let me just conclude this thought.
So in the next 1 week or so, we should be able to see things normalize. But also Ugandan traders, there are very many speculators who take advantage of these situations to just hike. For instance, Total and Shell, I think they had fairly enough reserves, and they have not been hiking. But you find that there are outlets in Kanungu, they are hiking even when they are getting constant supplies and so forth.
Honorable Minister, traditional fuel stations like Shell, Vivo, and Total has gone up by a factor of about 300 to 400 shillings. So they have hiked. It is the others that have gone the extreme, but even that is a significant...
No. But Shasmir,
that we had explained,
public health
there was an international phenomena that had given rise to this increase. But in this increase, in the last 1 week or so, I think they have tried to stabilize.
You told us on this show, Honorable Minister,
yes,
that government has a threshold,
yes,
beyond which...
And which has been announced. That's why you heard the Prime Minister saying, I have given a directive that the Commissioner should announce that the fuel, particularly petrol, should not go beyond 5,000 shillings.
The Prime Minister said she lost her words. She couldn't remember what she wanted to add.
It's you just making fun out of it, but that's the communication she was making.
Chris, I want to ask a public health question.
Yes, please do.
Because from the Ministry of Health's own numbers, the positivity rate by last week was 28%. I would imagine that out of 41 million Ugandans... It
has since fallen at about 8, yes.
Yes, it has fallen. But I would imagine that, therefore, out of 41 million Ugandans, it is possible up to about 10 million or 12 million were already infected with COVID. Why does government of Uganda and Ministry of Health, and this applies to the whole world, find it very dangerous to allow 7,000 truck drivers who may also, if the positivity rate in Kenya is less than 30%, so 30% of 7,000 is 2,100. Why do we, if we have already 10 million, 12 million who already have COVID, why do we fear these 2,100? I really don't understand it, because because Omicron was so widely spread in Uganda, I would imagine, therefore, it's trying to refuse a small minority, 2,100, that somehow they are going to distort your sample. What are they adding on? It's nothing.
We do not subscribe to the idea that you attain herd immunity through infecting the communities. It is morally wrong. While scientifically, yes, you may build immunity in the population, but from a moral standpoint,
no, that's not what I'm saying, Chris. Chris, that's not what I'm saying. I am saying, if you have positivity rate in Uganda, in a population of 41 million, let's assume 10 people are already infected with COVID in Uganda. Why do you try to restrict 2,100 from entering Uganda, from Kenya, who may be positive? What are you trying to save? The COVID is so widely spread in Uganda that the entry of 2,000 people with it, statistically, its addition to COVID in Uganda is statistically insignificant.
No, first of
It
all,
doesn't make logical sense.
Can we bring in the other members of the panel to engage with this discussion? Why?
but I can answer him. You see, coronavirus is a virus which mutates. When we test, even if you are two people who are positive, whoever tests positive, we now do genomic sequencing to check whether these are variants which are common or we are having new variants. That's very important. Because
you don't
how did
do it
we...
at the border, you know that the genetic sequencing is not done for everybody who's entering.
No, we do. If you don't know, you ask. Whoever tests positive, whether at Entebbe or the border points, that sample is taken for genetic sequencing.
After
That's
he has
how...
left and entered the country.
We all listen
Yes.
to Pono Pondo, and I think you articulated these issues very well. Do you, as government, think you've made some mistakes, both with the fuel crisis and the management of COVID?
Well, maybe the mistake, if I can call it a mistake, was failure for the Ministry of Health to harmonize with the decision which had been taken at the East African level.
That is a failure by government.
But
not by
the decision taken by Ministry of Health was in good faith, intended to protect.
Okay, I'll just run through a few numbers. So 10 days of stock, about 14 days of stock, if you add the government reserves at 30 million litres and whatever they have, because the law requires that every fuel station keeps at least 10 days of stock for its segment of the market. And we're consuming about 320 million litres, I think, as a country in a month.
So it's about 7 per day,
6.5
6.5
per day.
5 million liters
Then,
per day.
Yes. The other bigger question is national fuel reserves. Why don't we have sufficient reserves? 4 or 5 days of reserves at the national held, and this is running as a commercial entity, the Uganda National Oil Company. 4 days. If you put together the private players, they are required to have about 10 days of reserves. Total, 14 days reserves and you're out.
That gentleman of National Oil Company should have explained to you why, but I think really it is the cost of investment. The government took a decision also that for the time being we are not going to expand reserves. Policy and administrative measures were sufficient. As Nalunga has said, for the last 7 years, we did not expand the quantity in the reserves, but because of the stability of the transport line, we have been able to go through well.
I don't know what you want to say.
In the course of time, there are the government policy, there are private sectors, people who are constructing reserves. Government by itself, by the way, I think in Vrova, it has acquired land. So eventually...
It's building reserves in Impiji just off the Mitiana Highway.
That's the Vrova I'm talking about. So eventually we shall reach there. But for now, before we build physical facility for reserves, the policy and the stability of the transport route had served us well. The issue now is not even about the reserve. The issue is really the coordination among the government entities, so that the SOPs that they develop for managing as we prepare to fully open the economy should be robust.
Mr. Fono, can I take you back about 15 years ago, 2007?
Yes.
The stories that were told when we had a crisis,
Yes.
where the fuel reserve had been emptied for renovation. There were no reserves 15 years ago. 15 years later, we're talking about the same issue.
Well, maybe the people who are responsible went to sleep, and they also took advantage of the fact that situation stabilized. And this is not unique to Uganda. I mean, only recently the Americans ran out of Afghanistan. they had run
I
out.
thought they ran out of fuel.
Listen. They had run out of Somalia in 1993. They had earlier on run out of Cambodia. Earlier they had run out of Vietnam. Lebanon. So there are things that we can anticipate, but in the real world, things stand differently. But the real issue, which triggered this issue, is not that we don't have sufficient reserve. The real issue is lack of coordination by government entities as we prepared to open the economy fully. And I'm saying we can even broaden this discussion beyond fuel. We can look at the other sectors, whether education, whether you have seen, we are just saying we are going to rehabilitate schools. When the schools are opening is when we are saying we are going to rehabilitate. What were we doing 9 months ago? We should have factored that in the budget of 2021, 2022.
It looks like it.
No.
But your own admission, Mr.
No,
Mr.
I am admitting. You see, I don't want to sit on this show and I defend or try to explain away the unexplainable. I think we look smarter as a government if we admit internal failure, whether it is systemic or just operational.
Okay. Fair enough. I was going to say that everything looks like it's running in crisis mode. From education to other things.
If we are... you see, there's a spike. I even use the word a spike. This is a spike. And like Honorable Barry Musa said, we are going to stabilize this situation much faster than UK did. UK took they even called in soldiers.
Yes.
They called in the army. We have not even called in policemen to distribute fuel.
You appreciate the fact that part of Britain's problem was Brexit and foreigners coming into the country.
And they had discussed Brexit for 5-7 years, and they were unable to prepare.
Let me bring Chairman Mao and Jane back into this discussion. And two questions really for both of you. One is on the crisis around fuel reserves. The other question is, you are implementing policy that is removing people from the city. You're reopening the economy. The full reopening of the economy will be on the 25th, just on the eve of NRM's 36 years in power. And you've been moving around in Kampala telling vendors, get off the streets.
Telling or forcing them.
Yes. You've been moving around with soldiers, police, and trucks carrying away mobile money kiosks. You're telling borders there was an operation. Don't enter into the city. And these are the most affected by the 2 years of COVID restrictions because they sit at the bottom rank of the economy. I mean, what are you sitting about? The other day, I moved by taxi, and the conductor and the driver were having a conversation about that crisis. And they said, why not focus on the people hitting passengers on the northern bypass with stones and stealing from them? And then this guy said, you're going to see an increase in crime because of the segment of the population that you're targeting. I mean, government should be able to think through all these issues. Chairman Mao.
I don't think citizens who are suffering because of the fuel shortages are convinced by the government's excuses. We can, of course, decide to spin these things and talk about plans, but we know that this is a crisis that has been simmering. What matters is for Ugandans not to get used to this kind of thing. I don't think Ugandans should accept these excuses. The excuses are too many. I've said before.
Which ones? Which one was the chairman?
You are now talking about you doing better than Britain. You are basically telling us that we are ahead of the game. I've said before that the government should now just create a ministry for excuses so that we know that there's somebody who will explain whenever government fails to do something. That said, the idea of reserve is simple. you can only have a reserve if you have capacity. Many of us even move in cars without spare tires. Now, a spare tire is the simplest example of a reserve. It means if something goes wrong, you can have a fallback. The other reserve is savings at a personal level. Ideally, you would tell everybody, why don't you have reserve money in your account? It's because you don't earn enough, you have little to spare. So the pretense should stop. We are not a very rich country. We should plan better.
Chairman Mao, if you could allow me to cut in, you'll find that a bigger crisis, using the example you've used of at an individual level, your average corporate regular monthly salary earner would find themselves in a deeper financial crisis because of poor planning than the vendor who runs a kiosk, and from experience, the border guy who knows there can be a crisis. So sometimes it's actually not a question of poverty. It's a question of planning. It's a question of honestly assessing yourself and saying,
I've actually talked about both.
I am a landlocked country, so I am more vulnerable than someone who has access to a cost.
I said there should be no pretense. However much you earn, if you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the Serena, sooner or later, the day you lose your job, you are going to be worse off than a hawker. Look at the political class, the plight of people who lose elections, you know, from high life to low life, or from grace to grass. So I'm just speaking generalities, that our reserves cannot be as much as we may require. The rich countries like Norway can have trillions in reserves financially. And reserves is not just about fuel. It is about food, it's about money, it is about many things. So it goes back to the question of how the country is managed. And I think that is the broader debate that we should be talking about. The fuel crisis is a symptom of that. How can we deal with these problems? What you would call putting a bandage over a bleeding wound. If we had a functional railway system, we would not be talking about truck drivers. The RVR received a lot of money. Videos were released that soon we are going to have trains. We would not be talking about traffic jam. We have the investment in Kisumu so that fuel can come via Lake Victoria. All those are options. So like MsJane Nalunga said, the incompetence is not just about customs. As is often said, the bottleneck is at the top of the bottle. So it starts with the head of state himself, his government, the cabinet, and the people who make the decisions who fail to supervise.
Okay.
So we must talk about how our government functions. Because each time we have a crisis, the government appeals to us and we faithfully adjust to the problem instead of overcoming problems as a country. Sooner or later, Ugandans are going to get tired of living positively with crisis after crisis.
Thank you. Jane, I'd like you to come in. These policies are coming in rapid form. You're reopening the economy, you're chasing people out of the city center. And these are the bottom rank because they are the people you're targeting to give a hand up. The Prime Minister's 100,000 shillings that was being sent to border, vendors, zenkola zendia. You're chasing them out of the city center. They haven't been having a meaningful source of livelihood for the last 2 years. Now you're telling them, get out of the city. Borders, they haven't functioned. You initially put their limitation at 3 p.m., you move it up to 5 p.m., you move it up to 6, and then you cap it at 7, and you say, the rest of the economy can open, borders will not be allowed to open. And you're talking about maybe 1.2 million Ugandans actively engaged in the border trade. What is the thinking here? What should be, someone will ask, what's going on?
Maybe I just want to go back to the issue which Chairman Mao has raised about managing the economy and planning, actual planning for the people and for the economy. So I really don't know who is planning for this country. Because, like you said, it's firefighting, real firefighting. You know, for me, we had thought that the COVID pandemic would give us an opportunity to rethink so many things. Rethink the economy, rethink the management of this economy. Mr. Opondo was talking, when he was talking about the fuel reserves in Jinja, we said, you know, we ran a liberalized economy. We gave it to private sector, a private company, you know. Then you wonder, really, is it, what are we following? Are we just saying market economy, liberalize, and when it isn't working for the people? You know, today there is a term, economics, which work for the people, you know, has been saying that, you know. But this economic, the economics is not working for the people, but we are stuck there. And we are stuck to cleaning the city that people have to go out. Where are they going to go? Government hasn't planned for them. And you know, COVID also brought a new phenomenon of the urban poor. You know, the poor used to be in rural areas, but now they are the urban poor. There are also those poor, which Mao you are talking about, who are just a paycheck away. You don't get your paycheck today, tomorrow you are destitute, you know. So these people need to be planned for. The country needs to be planned for. And Mao, the issue isn't that we don't have money. The issue is to prioritize where we are putting our money. Uganda, we are not poor. Just look at our debt. Where is that money going? So the money is there, but we need to prioritize. If we plan that we are going to have reserves, and it's there in the budget. You go and Google the budget framework paper, 2021, 22, 2022, 23. It's there, the reserves in Nakasongo, but nothing has been done. You have talked about the railway line. You know, why should we be talking about trucks lining up 100 kilometers? And how many years down the road we don't have a railway line? You know, so it's a matter of planning. And when we are planning, I think it's important we plan in phases. What do we need to achieve in the immediate term, the medium, and the long term? But for our budget, when you look at it every year, it's like for today, this year, next year we go back on the board, you know. We plan for that year. So we need to have a longer term plan.
I believe you read those assessments of the National Planning Authority, the audit of the budget, because they do an annual audit of the budget.
Exactly.
Yes, and score it.
And you have a supplementary in the first quarter.
Exactly. You know, so I think it's the way we are managing our economy, the way we are managing our country. So I think we need to really to pull up our socks. We need to review so many policies which are not working, and they are there. And we need to prioritize that post-COVID, if we want to resuscitate the economy to recover, and also the people to recover, to create jobs, increase production and productivity, what needs to be done. And then we put resources there. But I don't see that happening. And you know, that's why government is putting in place so many so many measures which are hurting the people, and the people have already been hurt. You know, somebody was telling me, a friend from Kenya, I was saying, you know, Ugandans, you are so docile. You know, your president is very lucky. You know, but maybe that's why we are surviving, and they tell us, because the Prime Minister was telling us, boycott the stations which are overcharging. And then you do what? Where is the alternative? There are no alternatives. That's what they were telling us when it came to walking. To
which
where?
the government has banned also.
No, but how do you walk? How many, you know, people stay far? Where? How do you walk? There is no alternative.
I think Andrew is talking about walk to work
Walk
of 2011.
to work, yeah. but you see,
Work is also prohibited.
Yes.
you see, that was also the advice which we are given when it came to the health facilities during COVID. They told us, no, boycott those hospitals. Where else would we go? You know, the transport. You know, I was commenting when the lady from State House went to get hold of those people at the bus terminal, you know. And I commented that government sold off its UTC. That's where Mkwano is. Those of you, the young people who don't know that we had UTC, they sold it off. And then you go to get hold of those people, you know, because they're overcharging. You know, this is the disconnect. There's a lot of disconnect, like Mwenda was saying, you plan, you say this is what we want, in the budget, you do other things. So for me, I think we need to go back on the drawing board. We need to replan. You know, when we talk about...
We have never left the drawing board. No, we have never left
You have left it. You know, when we talk about...
we don't have a drawing board.
Because I think we've been waiting for the economy to take off. So the economy has been taking off, idling.
But really, I think, yes, I appreciate that some Ugandans are angry when a thing like this happens, when they were used since 2007. They've never had a fuel crisis. I appreciate that anger, for which I'm saying we as government, we should own up that there are things that we haven't done well. But I think it is also wrong for a policy analyst to say that the economy is not working for Ugandans.
But you see...
Are you saying that there are no areas of achievement and big achievement?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying, but let
us... Are we, as a country, are we poorer today than yesterday? Are we having fewer children in schools today than yesterday?
But...
Are we having fewer girls in schools and completing university today than yesterday? Are we having fewer mothers giving birth in hospitals or dispensaries and giving birth in a village banana plantation than yesterday?
But you see,
so please,
you know, we need to talk about what's going on.
You can talk about it, but I'm saying, let us speak a spike or things that are not working, rather than generalizing that the economy is not working. Yes, there are borders who are being, there are vendors, street vendors who are being removed. We can debate whether this is the right time to do so, especially when we are opening after 2 years of lockdown. But is this the city we are desirous of having? Are you saying that government should not take any measures at all to clean the city simply because we are opening?
No. We are saying plan for those people. Where are they going to do?
Are you saying that the increase in enrollment of children in schools hasn't come as a result of some planning? Is that what you are saying?
No. Look here. Don't bulldoze us into keeping quiet.
I'm not
bulldozing. Yeah, you are. You are. It's like you are saying everything is okay.
No.
We shouldn't talk about anything. You are talking about a spike.
Mr.
Mr.
Bond, had me admitting that there is working in silos in the government. That can't be of somebody who thinks that everything is working.
It is only has tell us about other things which
so
are not working.
I'm saying, let us pinpoint a problem, an area that's not working well.
Yes, I
but
have said
don't
it.
generalize. Where I have issues with you is generalization.
I haven't generalized.
That
Mr.
things are not
Opondo,
working for the country.
Mr. Opondo, I have told you that the crisis is just not in fuel. We have a food crisis. We don't have any food reserve. If we get a locust epidemic here, where are the food reserves? And it's there in the planning that we need food reserves. I have told you that the crisis is also about prices of maize. You know, people are impoverished there. Today, you go to the village, it's going to be, they are going to harvest maize. Ask any farmer, how much are you going to sell your maize? They don't know. They don't know. So all those are crises.
I need to bring Andrew and Dr. Badomo into this discussion.
Saying that their answer to the high fuel prices and shortages is to say that there is a reduction in infant mortality rate and maternal mortality.
You see, Honorable Mao, these things are interconnected. Unfortunately, it seems you don't present your case this way to the Ugandans, that these things are not singular, they are interconnected. And that's how we should be able to explain to Ugandans that these things are interconnected. And we do take recognition of where things don't work. But what I take issues with is to generalize that the economy is not working for Uganda.
But by saying they are interconnected, you are generalizing.
No.
36 years ago.
You better go back to study political economy.
36 years ago. Gentlemen and lady, 36 years ago, the NRM promised an integrated, self-sustaining economy. 36 years down the road, we are asking, is the economy integrated? Ofono Opondo says people are working in silos. Is it
That's different from integrated economy.
No. Hold it.
Yeah, no. There are different things.
He'll explain. You have the time here. Yes, you will. 36 years later, you're talking about the people at the bottom rank, the government of the people, being chased out of the city without being given an alternative. Borders restricted. Vendors being sent out without a plan to accommodate them. When these people turn up to, when we arrive on the 26th of January and we're commemorating 36 years, what would they say? What is their role in this economy? How do they fit in?
Well, first of all, I'm going to explain to you at a broad level three things. One, I personally believe that overall, the economic management of Uganda over the last 36 years has been quite impressive. If you look at data from the IMF, Uganda has had the 11th fastest growing economy in the whole world, out of 199 countries on the IMF list. 199. Uganda has had the 11th fastest growing economy in the world. The average rate is 6.02%. By historic standards, that's a great achievement. Given that the population growth rate over this period has been about 3.12%, so we have had per capita income growth of close to 3%. That again is one of the most impressive rates of per capita growth recorded in history outside of East Asia. No European country except Germany between 1955 and 85 achieved that kind of record. So in that sense, we need to applaud good economic management by the government of Uganda. Now, does economic success mean that every single person has benefited? Certainly not. So there will be vendors. Even if you go to the richest economy in the world, the United States, you will find homeless people in Los Angeles, in New York, in some of the richest cities in the world. Even if you go to countries like in Norway, you'll find many unemployed people who depend on government handouts. So we cannot have a perfect society. But what we can say is, has economic growth benefited the vast majority of Ugandans? I would also agree, yes. At the private level, the number of people living in poverty between 92 and today fell from 56% to about 20%. If you talk of economic development as the ability to access, to have a variety of things, a variety of choices, just imagine in 1990, me and you were alive, Charles. Uganda had one television station, had one radio station. You had only, I think, 4 brands of soda: Fanta, Pepsi Cola, Coca-Cola, and Mirinda. Okay. Yes, maybe. But today, there are so many clans of packed juices, you can't count. Ugandans have so much choice, whether it's in practically every product they have. We had one university, now maybe we have about 50. Uganda has really gone through an expansion of the economy that has created opportunities for so many people. And it is painful that the NRM has not been effective in communicating where Uganda was in '86 and where it is today and how much of progress we have made.
Would you move those numbers, Andrew, out of statistics and put them in real numbers?
But this is what I'm saying.
In 1996, 1990, as you're talking about, you had an average, you consistently have an average. Today, you have 8.3 million Ugandans stuck in poverty. You have another about 12 million Ugandans that live on the precipice. Any small shock, they'll fall. And that number has been sustainable over the last...
Yes. No, but the most important number, I think, is your average. Because if you move from 56% of your population living below the poverty line, 20%, that's a great achievement. But remember that also the population has been growing. In fact, that should always explain for you something. Population growth rate in Uganda is high because of 2 things. Because of improved access to medical care, many people now give birth in hospitals, so women, the number of women dying in childbirth has reduced. If you look at the infant mortality, then levels of immunization, levels of vector control, access to clean water is 79%. Ugandans have better nutrition, they have better clothing, they have better access to modern facilities. So just a moment, Charles.
I'm afraid to cut in. Apart from the developed West, where else in the developing world is population going down?
Well, I think that you should...
So why would you say, why would you put Uganda as an island? The population growth rate in Burundi, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in South Sudan, all numbers have been going up.
But I want perhaps you should go and look at the statistics. The most important thing about population is life expectancy.
Yes.
Uganda's life expectancy has grown up from about 39 years to 65 years. I can tell you, except for Rwanda, no country has registered much growth in life expectancy than Uganda in East Africa. Not Tanzania, not Ethiopia, not Kenya, not Central African Republic, not South Sudan, not Burundi, not Congo. Only Rwanda, only. So that's a great achievement, that's life expectancy. Well, yes.
Yeah, it is. I don't hear, I agree.
And if you want to measure well-being, life expectancy is an important thing. I have given you other indicators of well-being. Access to electricity is 60%. Are you aware? 22% of Ugandans are on green electricity, 38% are on solar. That's 60%. I have just come from the Democratic Republic of Congo. In fact, Ugandans who say that the things we see in Uganda is because of time. Just go to Central African Republic, go to South Sudan, and go to DRC here. Ugandan troops are occupying there. You cross from Bundubujo, you enter Congo. You have entered Uganda in 1963, people living in primordial conditions. Not even on a border can move through. Cars can't go. Charles, you are a journalist, please go to Congo and see.
I have been to Congo. The challenge with that is Congo has been in crisis, in permanent crisis.
But Uganda has had stability. Charles, okay,
yes.
So, if you ask me, because that's why I disagree with the opposition. Because you see, we must agree.
Where Chelsea belongs or what?
No, I have a disagreement with the opposition because for them they say Mwenda is a supporter of Museveni. Me, I defend things I believe in. Whether it is Museveni or Bobby Wine, if he supports it, I will defend it. You see, Museveni has achieved 2 things. We are discussing the 36 years of Museveni. Museveni achieved 2 things, Charles. One is stabilization of the political dispensation. In 1986, Museveni became the 8th president of Uganda or head of state. If you get 8 people divided by the 23 years, you get an average presidency of 2.6 years. There was so much instability and rapid change. Whatever you can criticize about his 36 years, Museveni has given Uganda such a long period of stability and continuity that now we can invest and do things. It is not true that this was inevitable. Many people said we could have done better. Actually, I think we could have done worse. Museveni has fought 22 civil wars in every single region of this country for the first 20 years. It is possible his government could have fallen. It is possible Uganda could be like Central African Republic. It could have been like Somalia. It could have been like DRC, as you say, even South Sudan. The fact that Uganda in 1986 was a net exporter of refugees. Uganda in 1986 was a source of instability. Today, Uganda is a host of refugees. It's not exporting refugees anymore. Uganda is an exporter of stability. Ugandan troops are stabilizing South Sudan, they're stabilizing DRC, they're stabilizing Somalia. We should be very proud of those achievements, even if they've been achieved by Museveni and NRM, whom we don't like.
Okay.
For me, I find that great. Two, on the economy. It is not true that it was inevitable that the economy of Uganda will grow the way it has grown. No, it has grown because A, there has been a political environment of stability that has been provided, and a stable macroeconomic policy framework that has ensured consistent growth, both in private fortunes but also in state revenues, which make it possible for the state to deliver many things. That's why you can drive to any board of Uganda on tarmac. But finally, I want to come to this. Even within that success, I have serious problems with Uganda's economy and how Museveni has managed it. And those problems are two. For the last 36 years, Uganda has failed to move towards value addition to her goods that it exports. I think that's a fundamental failure that has stifled economic transformation. Two, Uganda has sold this economy to foreigners. If for me, I found an opposition politician raising those two issues, that if we cannot produce value and sell value-added products, we will remain on a roundabout without transforming our society. That is why people who depend on agriculture for a livelihood have remained 70% since 1990. So for the last 25 years, what is that? Since 30 years, 32 years, same number. And one of the factors is that we don't add value to our products. The other is we have an economy controlled by foreigners. Let me give you an example. Look at banking.
I need to run for a short break, an ad break.
Yes. Take banking. 96% of all banking in Uganda is controlled, or 90% is controlled by foreign banks. I do not know of any country that developed where 90% of the banking is controlled by foreigners. Whether you take the United States, China, South Korea, whichever country, 90% was domestically controlled.
Isn't that a contradiction? You have just said Uganda has done relatively well in economic development.
Economic growth.
Economic growth
cannot easily be converted
listen, now that economic growth, don't you think these foreign-owned banks have played a role?
So this one, they have played a role, but what I'm saying, they have not played a transformational role. One of the reasons why you are stuck with 70% of your population still stuck in agriculture is the fact that a significant volume of that growth, or the surplus that is made, which is profit, is everywhere repatriated and externalized.
But Honorable Minister, I want you to explain NRM at 36 and your policy on borders, especially during COVID. You restrict them 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and say everyone else can open, they cannot open. I also want you to explain NRM at 36 and the people who are the base of the NRM. Those are the bottom rank, because you have issues with intellectuals, with the elites. No. Those, yes, you do. You do. You have said, the government has said it before, the party has said it before. Why are you chasing even people running mobile money kiosks, removing all of them? And yet these people are paying to KCCA. They are licensed. You've taken their money. Now you're picking up their operation.
Thank you very much. In urban development studies, there is what we call urban livability. And that's it refers to whether a city or a town meets your expectations of what should be. I want you to reflect on what Kampala is. Are you happy with the situation, the environment in Kampala? If I asked you, when did you last go to downtown Kampala? You cannot access some of those places. So now the effort in Kampala is to make it more livable. There are people who rent shops and they put their merchandise there. But now the hawkers and these vendors buy from the same shops and lay their items in front of the shops. And then the shops are not selling. Are you saying that is what we should encourage? And they are complaining. They are saying, now you allow these vendors to put their items in front of the shop, allow people can no longer access the shop. And therefore we have to reorganize the city. There are people who have said, use this COVID situation to reorganize the city by way of handling the border industry within the city. So much as you want to condemn government for these decisions, but the wider public also is happier if we reorganize Kampala.
Yes,
and that speaks to the reasons why there is this reorganization. It's not true that the vendors are being told to go away.
Go nowhere.
No, to go nowhere. There are gazetted markets like Usafi and others where the vendors are being relocated. But some of them are obstinate. They want to refuse because they want to be on the streets. But I think you should support the efforts of government, that we should clean the city, not chase away people, but reorganize them, resettle these vendors to have gazetted place where they can sell, so the other people who are also occupying shops can also sell. So that's the effort that is in the town, and it's in good faith.
Does that also speak to mobile money?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Charles, just one small thing. You know, I would agree with Chris, but disagree with him on timing. You know, for 2 years, people have not been working, have not been earning, Chris. I think the government should be sensitive. Maybe we could implement this in 2025, maybe after the election of 2026, but people have been on the wire, not having anything. You are just beginning to open up. Give them a chance to earn something and recover.
The ones in the shops,
have
they been working?
But that's what I'm saying. So why are
those who are inconvenienced by the hawkers in front of the shops, have they been working?
Yes, they've been working.
Why did you wait for?
Yes.
Why did you wait for the
At least
reopening
the
of the
shops have
economy
bigger capital.
instead of announcing these measures midway the lockdown and saying so that people are prepared, so that they can go and find space find a stall in
Chris
Usafi?
and Ofono,
Why now?
After this COVID,
When
we
there
need
was
to give our
lockdown.
people about 2 to 3 years to stabilize. You need to be sensitive.
Well, we can discuss the timing, but I've given you, in principle, the story behind reorganization of Kampala. And in the medium long term, we are going to do a major reorganization by improving the transport systems within the city, so that when you come from West Nile, from Karamoja, you should feel free to traverse the city and reach all the corners. Right now, there are people who fear to come to Kampala because of the situation that Kampala looks like, and that's why we are reorganizing. Now, secondly, let me go to the 1986 to today.
Would you first speak to the border and then you can go to 1986? The restrictions on them since COVID started.
First of all, the restrictions.
And I need to say, Honorable Minister, pardon me, I need to say the Minister for Works and Transport sent a positive signal. I have seen tweets from Susan Kataike today indicating an engagement with their leadership to have their participation in the reorganization. But my question is, does government really understand the border industry?
Definitely, yes. Definitely, yes. First of all, the restrictions in managing COVID have been extended to different sectors. All sectors, borders inclusive. So the borders haven't been singled out or being punished in this lockdown, no. Two, yes, the president announced that we are going to do full reopening, but the borders will still be subjected to curfew from 7 p.m. to 5:30.
Why?
As we reorganize the border industry. I am sure you have heard voices across the country that we should not move the way the borders are moving in the country, especially in Kampala. And therefore,
do we have an idea how many borders are operating in the city?
Absolutely, we have the figures.
How many?
We have the figures.
How many?
Not only the city, but the whole country.
How many?
The statistics are there.
Yes, how many?
I may not have the figure by fingertips. I'm not in charge of borders, but the figures
I could give you numbers if you ask me.
You may have prepared for the figures, but I'm telling you, government knows how many people are in Uganda, how many borders, how many. We have the whole department of WUBOS, which digs out statistics. So you should not just choose the government. We don't know the borders. We know. And the element of borders has the aspect of COVID-19 measures, but also has the aspect of security. So it's not a punishment that the borders will be restricted forever, but there will be reorganization, and sooner or later, we shall lift that curfew on borders, and they will start to operate. Yes.
Go ahead.
But actually, you know that earlier on, government had also announced that we are going to install tracking devices in vehicles, including borders, and all those measures are being worked out. And once those systems are put in place, they will be allowed to operate. And there is nothing wrong whatsoever with reorganizing the border industry. Let me come to
36 years.
36 years. You see, the ideological pillars of NRM are 4. And if you have to assess whether NRM has achieved, whether the fundamental change promised by the president in 1986 has been realized, you can assess us on those 4 pillars. Number 1, patriotism. Compare patriotism.
Okay.
And there you speak to things like sectarianism, disunity, and so forth. Pre-1986 and today, has there been a positive change? And my answer would be yes. Number 2.
Would we sample across the team here, whether the answer, they agree with you and the answer yes? Because that's your own assessment.
Yes.
As a government minister.
But I'm
what about
talking,
the others?
I'm the one talking.
Yes.
Yes. For instance, when you look at the politics before NRM, UPC, DP, CP, what were they based on? Religion, tribalism. And I think NRM has tried to dismantle all those and united Ugandans. Yes, you'll not get a party today, political party, which is based on religion or tribe or some other characteristics.
Your former minister for the presidency went on national television and accused the National Unity Platform and accused the Catholic Church directly, accused and said Buganda. Isn't that almost a return to...
But is that the main trend of our politics? Yes, you, an individual or group, can try to use religion or tribe, but will you be the main trend, the main axis? No.
And I thought you were going to say that he accused the NRM. He didn't accuse NRM. She accused those groups which are trying to resurrect that kind of sectarianism, which we condemn. And that's why Ugandans could not vote those kind of parties that are relying on tribal sentiments, sectarian sentiments, religious sentiments, that the position of NRM is known. Number 2...
I have a few minutes. I will ask you to speed up a little bit.
Number 2 is Pan-Africanism. How have we fared in terms of appreciating that all Africans are brothers and sisters? That justifies why we help in Somalia, we go to Congo, South Sudan, because we are not selfish. We have to protect and fight for the African race. Number 3, democracy. I think it is Mwenda who said we had over 8 presidents in a period of 24 years. Who was electing those presidents? We only had elections in 1962 and 1980. But now you can predict with the statistical and microscopic accuracy that after every 5 years, Ugandans will go to the polls and determine whom they want to lead them. Number 4, the 4th pillar is socio-economic transformation. We have indicators which measure quality of life, and we have benchmark indicators 1986. Where was Uganda 1986? Where is it today? And if you gave me time, I would give you the figures. I record 1985.
Would you also answer the question, where ought it to be?
Yes, we can also give you the answers, and maybe why we may not be where you would want us to be. Those can be explained. If I give you an example, in 1985, the then president of Uganda, Milton Obote, came to Kampala. I was a student, and he was crying loudly that there was scarcity of everything, including salt. There was no salt for those who were born after 1986. And by the time you have no salt in shops, you can talk of any other thing not being available. So if you want to use naked eyes to measure the economy, go into the shops now. Is there that scarcity?
Yes, because in 1985, the National Resistance Army was in the bush fighting against the government of Apollo Milton Obote. So supply lines had been disrupted, and there couldn't be supplies in the shops.
But the NRM revolution was shorter than what the LRA took in the bush, and the other insurgents who fought NRM.
Thank you very much.
If you go...
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I'm afraid I have only about 7 minutes, and I need every panelist to have their say on the 36 years. Yes, you conclude your thought.
Well, next time you should give time to government people to explain more. You raise the questions and then you don't want us to answer.
You've had 35 years to explain.
Yeah, absolutely.
36
That's
years
why we
of
need
explaining
time.
more. 36 years of explaining more,
because whether
and
you
all
look
the
at
infrastructure to explain more.
Whether you look at the number of roads constructed, health facilities, how many children are in school, mortality rates have fallen down, life expectancy, all of these are in the positives in the 36 years. So when the president said this is a fundamental change, we can measure it, and I can confirm for you and the public that there has been a fundamental change in terms of improvement of quality of life of Ugandans.
I'll not belabor that. Let me have every panelist here have their say on the 36 years. Mr. Fonopondo, then Andrew, Jane, and we'll end with Chairman Mao.
Well, just the ability to rebuild the state and the country is something that we should be joyous about, that we have been able to rebuild our country. It is functioning. We may have this quiet in certain elements, but generally speaking, Uganda is much more positive today in many, many respects. When I was in university, I think I'm the oldest on this panel. My grandfather, who's younger than me, who keeps claiming, I told him that if you're the grandfather, you don't even have to tell people that I'm the grandfather of the clan. People will know it.
You children
We used to say, we of Makerere of the old, we used to say Makerere was the only university south of the Sahara and north of the Limpopo. Today,
Now there are over 50 universities.
that alone. The other day I was reading, and this has been for the last 3 years of university graduations, whether private or public, the girl child have overtaken the boy child. In my sub-county of Mulanda, I don't have a single girl who I went with to P1 to P7 who transited with us to Makerere, let alone HSC. None. Today, if you go to Mulanda, virtually 50% of the homes have. Those are anecdotes of change. Today in Uganda, there is no part of Uganda today where you can say it is too far, too remote, you cannot invest. The other day, I was in Rupa sub-county, the last sub-county in Moroto district, and I said if I was younger as Mwenda, I would actually shift.
Okay.
When you travel to Bundubujo, you then say, if I was much younger, I would shift to Bundubujo or Amuru because you see opportunity. What NRM, the 36 years of NRM has done is to create multiple layers of opportunity for everyone. What we need is really to trigger people from where we had been about the good old days. There is nothing you cannot sell in Uganda today. Just by cutting grass along the road, you can earn money. You cut grass for people who are feeding their cows, and you earn money.
My time is out.
Today we are selling things that we never... You had just talked about integrated. If you go to any shop in Uganda today, Ugandan merchandise. Listen, Uganda. Listen, but you are now disrupting. Ugandan merchandise, finished, processed, or semi-finished, is now reaching 60%.
Yes, my question, the big question is,
which big?
Do you put 36 years in perspective?
Yes,
it's a very long time.
Yes. If I look at with African countries that never had similar breakdown with Uganda, and we can look at Tanzania, we can look at Kenya, we can look at Malawi, we can look at Zambia, we can look at Senegal, we can look at Ivory Coast. Uganda, in many respects, Uganda is doing much better than those countries. And so, for me...
Kenya's economy is still 3 times bigger than Uganda's economy.
It has been like that since independence because of a white settler economy.
Andrew, you have 1 minute, Jane will have 1 minute, and Chairman Mao will have 1 minute.
Since I'm the oldest man, let me have the last word. Chairman, my grandchildren can go first.
Okay, thank you. I agree entirely that
Please go ahead.
I agree that the economy has grown and that there has been a change from 1986 for some of us who were there, even in Amin's time. But I think we need to aspire for better. You don't compare yourself to a village child or a villager when you came to Kampala just because, and you think you are better off. We should aspire for better. And I think we need to be aware that there are some critical gaps in our economic growth. For example, this economic growth is jobless. There is a very high unemployment. it's not green growth. We have destroyed our environment. So we need to look at those things so that we make them better. When we talk about them, it doesn't mean that we don't appreciate where we have come from. For example, you can't talk about that people are okay, people are rich, yet this country is the most unequal country. In fact, today we shouldn't even be talking about poverty. It's about inequality. The rich are rich and the poor are very poor. So we need to reduce, that gap. Then the issue of economic transformation. This country hasn't structurally transformed. It's like we are still colonial times. When we are exporting coffee, we are still exporting coffee. And what does that mean? That people in the rural areas are still poor. Okay. You know? So we need to address those issues so that we can be able, all of us, to partake of this very, the cake and to the economic growth.
Today I was watching a video of President Museveni at a ceremony launching a road construction long ago in the 90s. And he was talking about the challenges his government was facing, delays and so on. And he gave a proverb. He said, if your stomach is injured and your intestines are falling out, it is your duty to hold the intestines. Every country faces threats. So the question is, who will hold our intestines when they are coming out? And it doesn't matter which country. We have the threat of right-wingers, even in America, where people can storm the Congress and so on. There are 4 things we have to consider as we evaluate the turning point that 1986 was. 1986 was obviously a turning point, and it raised a lot of expectations. We look at security. People expected a new character of an army, politically grounded and firmly pro-people. But now you have vagabonds and lumpens being brought in to reinforce those who have been properly trained. They don't wear uniform, they move in drones. They are the ones who are now the face of security. That is a big failing, and it puts a discount on the expectation. The economy, we have talked endlessly about it. We still live, in Mamdani's word, in the shadow of Idi Amin, because I think it is only Idi Amin who had the capacity to do something truly earth-shaking. I don't think any government has had the capacity to do something like that. We need to own our economy. The third one is national unity. The polarization, people pulling apart. We need to have a new conversation to build a new consensus, and so that Ugandans can see the one thing they have not seen before. It was good that President Museveni, at least in the early years, was able to contain this faction fighting, because Uganda was really defined by fights among factions. And when the new constitution was brought in, it gave hope. Now that the intestines of the constitution are falling out, and we can only put it back in through processes of dialogue to build. Is
anybody holding them now?
I'm doing my part. Are you doing yours in the media? The last one is democracy.
Don't run away with the
the question was, will we have this no-party democracy whose roots were in the Luwero Triangle bushes based on resistance councils, or the competitive multi-party democracy? Now we see zero-sum politics coming in again, where elections are no longer a competition to serve, but a struggle for survival. And those who are in power feel like, I'm in danger if I leave. And those who are not in power say, I'm in danger if I don't get power. And that zero-sum game is a big challenge. Nevertheless, if the president remembers that he is the person who has the most important duty to hold the intestines of the country, then he will do the right thing.
Thank
and
you very
that's
much.
my direct appeal to him.
Thank you.
As
Andrew,
he
your 1 minute?
celebrates 36 years.
The good thing is you time yourself, so 1 minute.
My 1 minute is to first disagree with her. She said Uganda is the most unequal country. I don't know where she got this statistic. The measure of inequality is called the Gini coefficient. If you look at the Gini coefficient of Uganda, if you measure it not from 0 to 1, let's use 1 to 100, it's still the same thing. Uganda's Gini coefficient is about 0.395, or you can say 39.5, right? Whether you look at Rwanda is about 47, Kenya about 50 something, Tanzania about 45. In fact, with the exception, I think, of Benin and Malawi, there is even not a single democracy in Africa which has a better Gini coefficient than Uganda. In other words, which has a better income distribution, equality of income distribution than Uganda. So I think that's a fact. But I just wanted to conclude this by saying something. Museveni and his opponents have always had a quarrel where Museveni said Uganda by 2020 will become a middle-income country. And then it didn't, and then they have been criticizing him. I told them, you see, if you use nominal dollars to determine middle income, you are going to be shocked because any change in the foreign exchange will create a different figure. You see, if you check the IMF today, Uganda's per capita income is $1,018. According to the World Bank, lower middle income is supposed to be, for 2021, is supposed to be $1,046. So Uganda is $28 less of middle income. If tomorrow the exchange rate falls from 3,500 to 3,450, Uganda will become a middle-income country. We didn't think you have changed.
And they may not feel it in my wallet.
Exactly. So Museveni is going to win the middle-income battle. And I'm telling you this month, Uganda is going to enter middle-income status when nothing has changed. So the quarrel they have been having with him is going to be because I had so many debates with him. I said, please, you don't quarrel with the man over middle income because if you set in domino dollars, it's determined by the exchange rate on a daily basis. So Uganda is going to become by the end of this month as the
NRM will achieve. Yes. So the NRM might have to announce that we have arrived in middle income. By the 26th.
We may arrive at the middle income status.
Our time is out. We need to get out of here. we need to get out of here. My questions normally are about if you extrapolate the 36 years in power, the stability sustained over the period of time, the bigger question shouldn't be, like the minister and Mr. Pondo here wants to emphasize, where we're coming from. Because you're talking to more than 78% of the population that did not leave what you're talking about. We're not there with you in Kabale.
You are not a student of Kwame Nkrumah.
No,
Kwame Nkrumah said, Chris,
they are assessing the country as it is today.
Kwame Nkrumah said, those who would merely judge us by the hits we have achieved would do better to remember the depth from which we started. And I agree.
No,
okay.
Isn't it the Banyankoro who say, you who's just coming from the underground, the dark place, don't complain that the sunshine is literal. Please don't complain that the sunshine.
Well, the children who were born 36 years ago, 35 years ago, 34 years ago, 33, 32 years ago, 30 years ago, are not coming from the dark place. So they cannot. They will measure their
we shall judge that one. We can judge that one by the results of the election of last year, or better still,
those will measure
the maintenance
their
of stability and acceptance of government policy, or indeed,
those will measure their sunshine from what they saw, not what you're telling them. I'll just take this because I think it's important. And then
the sunshine, but where there is something causing an eclipse, being in the hole and being in the open is the same.
Our time is out. I'll just take this message from Peter Mulis again. He says, we plan to connect Ginger to the lake by jetty and pipeline, so we increase products coming over the lake. We plan to build a bigger terminal, actually a bigger terminal with 320 million liters in Mpigi. And it's planned for construction. These interventions will sort out logistical and distribution bottlenecks. UNOC runs Ginger Storage Terminal in joint venture with One Petroleum. We have refurbished the facility and opened import route over the lake. We are in the process of constructing a pipeline and jetty to connect to the lake. My own addition to this, UNOC has been asking government since they took over provide us money to stock the reserves. Government has never provided a shilling. So even if it wanted, it cannot put reserves in that ginger facility.
We have been spending money in having good bilateral relations so that fuel trucks come without a lot of hiccup.
And those fuel trucks are killing the roads that you're building and are proud of, and you need to address that as well.
The trucks don't pass through.
We need to let our listeners go and sleep.
And they're killing the environment by carbon emissions and other things. Our time is out. Thank you very much.
The celebration this year?
Thank you very much. Our
In the
time is
Kololo
out.
ceremonial ground.
Thank you very much. Our time is out and we need to get out of here. Thank you very much. Dr. Chris Bariomunsi of Onopondo, Andrew Mwenda, Jane Nalunga, and Chairman Mao. Thank you very much to you all, our viewers, for joining us tonight and always. And thank you very much to the production crew that's here played to deliver the show to you. From me, it's a good morning.